They are currently 10-7. They went off to a pretty slow start, especially considering what they did in the bubble and making that playoff run. So, talk to me, man. What do you think is the cause of this slow start, and what can the Denver Nuggets do to move on and try and reach that goal of making it to the finals?
I think that the cause of the slow start was an identity crisis because there were some questions that needed to be answered for that particular team. Because if you look at it, Jeremy Grant was the most notable departure. One, for his defense, and two, because people noticed in the bubble he was shooting threes and getting to the rim off the dribble and stuff that people didn't know him for in OKC. And I feel like it turned a lot of heads because people were like, "Oh my God, another long, athletic small forward that could shoot the ball and switch defensively." So people would just, now that's popcorn. People love that type of stuff now. So I feel like with him and Michael Porter Jr. essentially playing the same position, small forward, power forward, but having two different games and identities and strengths. Um, I feel like Michael Porter needed more attention as an offensive player because he just wanted to know that the coach was going to commit to running more plays for him and using him more as a focal point or as a legit second option. And not to mention, Murray had a legendary playoff performance in some certain games. So I feel like things just had to settle because Murray coming into the season, I think was going to be looked at as can he be the legit next second option? So when Jokic doesn't have it going, the team can still function. But Michael Porter Jr., I feel like he just needed that confidence that he was going to be able to have the treatment to where he didn't have to play so carefully to make sure his minutes didn't get cut too much. And now he can kind of just go out there and ball a little bit since he's kind of proven himself, since there's nobody else to really take minutes from him at that position. So I feel like, good offense leads to good defense, and defense was their problem. And when I say good offense means a good defense, I just mean when the offense is bad, people are confused. People have stuff going on off the court. Uh, People just generally don't want to play defense because basketball, from what I know, I think what makes it a fun game is the offense. The defense is necessary to win the game, but I feel like when people look at highlights, they generally look at offense. And when it comes to playing it, I do feel like for the super talented people out there, when you're scoring, I just feel like playing defense becomes easier than if you have a bad average offense. So I think that him taking on that bigger role and embracing that has made him want to hustle more and at least try more on defense, which helps. And that's why they're on the 4 game win streak, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that they needed some time to get this group of guys together. You mentioned, um, you mentioned, dang, uh,
Grant?
yeah, Jeremy Grant. Uh, but and he was a big loss for that team as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I think also the loss of Plumlee and Torrey Craig.
Mm-hmm.
I think that along with the loss of Jeremy Grant is one of the bigger reasons that they are kind of struggling right now. If you look at the Denver Nuggets uh, from last year to this year, those three were kind of the defensive anchors for the team. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Miles Plumlee protected the paint. Torrey Craig was the perimeter defender. Jeremy Grant, he could do both. He could was a perimeter defender, and he could block shots as well. And then offensively, Jeremy Grant really came on, especially in the bubble. So I feel like that team had checked all the boxes defensively and with the offense of Jokic and Murray, with Porter coming on. I think that's really what made that team last year special. And losing your three defensive anchors, I feel like that kind of hurt the Denver Nuggets early. But to your point, they definitely had to gel together and get things situated. I do think that Murray being somewhat inconsistent and struggling a little bit, uh, I think that that also plays a role in why they started off pretty slow, especially coming off his performance in the bubble. I think a lot of people expected him to continue that kind of play.
Yeah.
Um, and he's played decent. He's like you said, inconsistent. So we'll see how that continues. But Jokic, I feel like he's made a case for probably the best center, either him or Embiid, whichever one you prefer. But I just feel like defensively they're not what they were last year, and offensively I feel like they have a lot of people that can score, and the only thing that's kind of holding them back is, some people might not hit shots one night uh, or another. And I really feel like that, along with the defense, like I said, is really what's uh, contributed to this slow start. So moving forward, I feel like they just have to continue to build uh, chemistry offensively, because I really feel like that's what's going to carry them. I don't really see them being a defensive team or have players that can hold it down on defense like they did last year to sustain them through the season and then throughout the playoffs like they did last year. So I feel like offensively they're going to have to build that chemistry and have that as their kind of catalyst.
Well, it is a regular season, and it is a weird regular season because people miss time with COVID and injuries and things like that. So people's records aren't always indicative of how good the team actually is. But with that being said, with them being 10-7 now, do you think that they have a chance of beating the Lakers?
I
The
don't think
finals?
so.
You don't think so?
In the West Finals?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't think so. I don't. I mean, in my opinion, I don't really see anybody beating the Lakers. Uh, Even
Hmm.
with the Nets, I still would take the Lakers. I mean, I know a lot of people probably differ about that, but in my opinion, right now at least, I mean, this is an early finals prediction. But if it where if I was picking, I don't think that there are too many teams out there that can beat the Lakers right now, especially the way that they're rolling. Um, and currently, as this video is going on, I know they're playing Philly right now, but they're undefeated on the road. So, um,
Hmm.
and of course, that's not going to sustain throughout a whole 72 game season. But um, just seeing them playing right now, I don't see too many teams beating the Lakers, and I'm at this point in time, I don't see the Denver Nuggets being able to pull it out against the Lakers. No.
Okay. Because the reason that I was asking is because that ultimately needs to be their goal, because it's cool to have teams with strong cores and strong nuclei, but especially for this team, I think that you only can stay young for so long, and I think it's good to try and figure out if you have realistic chances of winning titles where you're at when you're in your mid to late 20s, because when you get in your 30s, I feel like at that point you start to hit the back end of your prime around 32. So I'm saying this in regards to Jokic, who's still very young, but you know, I don't want them to end up like, let's say, the Clippers. If you remember, like the Clippers in like 2013, that's what I don't want to happen again, where you just got talented pieces that should win and you think they should win, but something always kind of stands in the way of them making the finals or something. Because that was probably one of the most frustrating things to watch, how the Clippers would have strong starts to the regular season and then have great players, talented players, Chris Paul, Jamal Crawford, JJ Redick, and them guys, but Blake Griffin at the time. But I don't want them to be that. So I think that it's good that we're talking about this because it's like, okay, so their defense isn't good. Their offense is good. It ranks third in the league right now. So I think in order for them to honestly beat the Lakers, what they'll have to end up doing, they'll have to play like the best offensive team in the league, honestly, because the Lakers are a good offensive team. So it's like
Mhm.
if you take a good offensive team that's bad at defense and play a team that's great at offense and great at defense, I don't see how you're going to consistently win that unless one of the guys on the other better team gets hurt or out with COVID. So, I mean, that would be their only hope if like AD had to miss time with COVID or
Mhm.
something. So, um, I'd say that Michael Porter is going to have to continue to make strides. Paul Millsap is turning 36 this year, really old guy. Uh, you know, and at the shooting guard spot with Will Barton starting, you might need you might need to make some adjustments there. Looking at, do you want to start Harris or who? Although he's not that good on offense, I mean, I think it's good to kind of figure that out now because, like I said, the clock is ticking, especially for guys like Millsap. I don't know how long he's going to really be able to contribute too much more at a high level, especially like I said, coming into age 36. So, Jokic is limited. I'll say that because he's physically limited defensively. He has the IQ to be in the right spots. He just doesn't have the athleticism or the speed or quickness to recover when he gets beat. But like I said, Michael Porter Jr. does, and I feel like if he can just tighten, work on his mobility a little bit more as far as like through his hips, that can increase his ceiling, and just kind of continue to listen to vets like Paul Millsap, who've been in the league, been on a bunch of different teams. Just how to get better, man. Because like I said, he has the physical tools for it to be a really good defensive player. Because he's a good rebounder. He definitely can crash the boards. It's just the fact that defensively, I feel like he gets lost sometimes, doesn't see things that are kind of like easy. That way, if he could read it, he probably could end up with a steal or, a contest on a shot where a lot of times he just will get kind of burnt by an action. So, yeah, I feel like that's really all to be said because I mean, offensively, you're not going to get too much better. I mean, they got guys that can shoot, guys that can put the ball on the floor, and then you got Jokic as the playmaker who can do a little bit of everything. But the only thing that they can really ask for is for Jamal Murray to be a little bit more consistent and just kind of figure out what type of player is he. What type of player is he? Is he a 25-point per game scorer like Kyrie? Is he or like Kyrie and Steph? Is he a volume scorer like Iverson, Westbrook? I don't know. Like in his best form, what really is he? Is he going to be a lockdown traditional PG that plays defense, averages 19 points, 8 assists? So I feel like he's got to figure out what type of point guard is this dude. You know what I mean? Because right now it's just like I don't really know what to describe him as. Because when I look at his highlights, I'm like, oh yeah, he's up there with Kyrie and Steph and Dame when you look at him like his highlights. But if you actually watch the game, you're like, you look at him like, uh, what
Yeah.
happened? He got
Yeah.
7 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and it's tough because a lot of people saw him in the bubble and going off and doing what he did there. I think the last game against the Clippers, he had like 40 points in game seven, right? Or something like that.
Man,
So
yeah.
people are expecting that. And it's just been a little tough for him over, this first couple of games.
Yeah, and like I said, I talked about Michael Jackson Jr. Ha, no, I'm joking. That's crazy. Michael Porter Jr. as the guy that that has probably the most potential to be a kind of switchable defender in the NBA because of his physical tools. But I'm not gonna forget Bol. I feel like Bol. This is gonna be difficult, but if he can just add more lower body strength, he can at least be a good drop coverage center. But his foot speed on defense is awful.
Yeah. Chris, that's a very interesting point because I forgot about Bobo. I know, especially at the beginning of the bubble when they were playing those warm up games. Bobo was like one of the uh, people most talked about, or players most talked about in those few like warm up games. People were talking about how talented he was, and just kind of saying he can be very good in the league. So, and it's cool that you mentioned Michael Porter Jr. having the potential to be a great defender because, I mean, they're both him and Bol. They're like very long, athletic players that can. Bol can protect the rim, and Michael Porter Jr. He has the athleticism to guard on the perimeter, and the length to do so as well. So that's that's pretty
Uh,
interesting, man.
yeah, and the thing about that makes it so tough for at least Bol is number one, he's tall, so lifting weights on a tall frame is always difficult because with them it's really, especially Bol, it's just the hips, man. Because like he when he's in a straight line and his body is squared up with wherever he's trying to go, he has good rip through speed, good full court speed because of the stride length to get from point A to point B faster than a guy of similar height like Gobert. But I feel like Gobert just has so much better hip mobility, so much better. Yeah, there's basically hip mobility and lower body strength that he's on balance when he has to change his directions moving backwards, backpedal, turn, side. He's so much more unbalanced. And if you do attack his body, yeah, he still has a high center of gravity. I'm talking about Gobert. So he's going to get pushed around sometimes just because he's tall, but at least he can still keep up with guys in a more drop coverage type scenario because I don't think Bol is ever going to be a switchable defender. But like I said, for a drop coverage center, if you can just work on that interior side, low core strength, stuff like that, I feel like it's doable. But like I said, it's tough because basketball is a largely a finesse sport. Well, if you're a finesse player, keep it that way. And Bol, his strength is definitely not power. So with all that finesse that makes him good, the thing is, when you're a finesse player like Durant or I don't know, Hakeem or something like that, like a star player, when you lift a lot of heavy weights, it's kind of a sacrifice to develop that lower core strength because if you're really training hard during the summer to get your core and your lower body right, oftentimes you really don't need to be playing basketball that day. Like you need to kind of stay off the court because you'll tax your lower body too much and end up hurting yourself. Whereas with football, you know, for bigger players that have a higher center of gravity, they don't play games as often. And I'll go ahead and say that a lot of football generally has a lot more power based positions. So that finesse is not as needed. That fine motor skills not as needed for across the board as it is for basketball players. So it's a tall task, but I think that it's worth looking into as far as trying to use him in a different way. Because offensively, like I said, it's the guile and the finesse that makes him good in the first place. So it's tough. It's tough. Like I said, for basketball players, getting stronger, especially when you're built like that, is tough. And I'm talking about like lower body, tough strength, deadlifts, you know what I mean? Hip thrust, stuff like that, glute bridge, stuff like that. It's tough. Giannis
Yeah,
was able to do it, but look, he's not a finesse player. So he had nothing to lose.
yeah, he's a power player. Yeah, most
Yep.
definitely.
Yep. So we'll see
Um,
what they can do, man, with what they got. But it's a definitely a difficult situation. But Michael Porter Jr., I feel like he'll be their saving grace because if Jamal Murray is not going to be a legit second option, then Michael Porter might take his spot, and Jamal might not need to carry such a load if Jokic is not on, since he can just be like the Klay Thompson of the group, if you will.